Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have back with me Laura Williams. Laura, first of all, welcome back.
Thanks a bunch, Tom.
So, Laura, we are recording this before Thanksgiving. We're about 6 weeks out from the conclusion of the show, The Magnificent Seven Rides Again. And I wanted to start off by asking what were your observations, reflections, feelings about this year's show?
It was another great, successful show. We had a lot more foot traffic this year, I think, than we did the previous year. And we had one Saturday where we all painted and demonstrated during the day. And so that was a lot of fun. I think more fun than most everyone expected. But lots of people came in that day and had questions. And so that was another really neat part about this year's show.
Was there anything about the demographic of the crowd this year that you thought was maybe a little different than last year?
We had several groups of people that were from out of town and some from out of state who had come in to see the Two Perspectives show at Museum of Western Art, the Kwang Ho and Scott Christensen show. And after they went to that show, they headed our way, which honestly was very surprising to me, but also I felt quite honored that they would take the time to step over and look at our show. So different people from different areas, not just the locals.
What was it like painting in front of a crowd? Had you done that before?
I have,
Okay,
yeah. I do a lot of plein air
right.
events. When you're plein air painting, especially like in downtown Kerrville, you get lots of people that walk past and want to ask questions. But something unique, that Saturday when we demoed, I was working on a cow that I had started previously, and I wasn't quite satisfied with the proportions of the cow. It was a neighbor's prize Jersey heifer. And so while I was painting at KACC, I turned the painting upside down, which is what you do to see things differently. So I was painting upside down this cow. So there was a lot of interaction with me about why are you painting upside down and what's the purpose of that?
Did you have any 8-year-old girls or maybe 8-year-old boys come up with sort of wide-eyed, "How do you do it? What are you doing? What does it mean?" And you have the chance to engage them in that way?
Yes, that day we demoed. A couple of kids again came by and why are you painting upside down? So we talked about how that changes your view and changing the view helps you to see things better. And on that subject, we may have spoken of this in our other podcast, but we as a group talked about how can we reach more school kids, and we brainstormed in the 11th hour, which was too late to pull it off this year, but we talked about it would be really neat if we could somehow have a day where we set up centers and we each teach school age kids at the museum just a facet of how we paint or how we start with a composition, those kinds of things. So I feel like next year we're going to do Magnificent Seven rides for the third time, or maybe it's second time. I feel like we'll try to incorporate something like that where we can engage more school children.
Did you sell any paintings?
I did.
Well, that's
Yes.
always good.
Yes, it's a good feeling.
I can feel it. So I was there on the opening weekend, and many of us there knew the artist personally, a lot of friends and families. As that crowd sort of dissipates and you move to people who you might not know personally, how did that dynamic change for you?
Mm, the obvious, you talk about less personal things, but for me, people were, I think, intrigued with the places where my paintings were initiated from. I had one painting from White Sands, New Mexico, and one from Big Bend, and then a lot of little wildflower paintings. So they were honestly, it was the White Sands painting most people wanted to talk with me about. Where was that? And then if they'd been to White Sands, we talked about what a surreal landscape that is, some lack of color, almost monochromatic landscape. So anyway,
I wonder if people in New Mexico understand just the diversity of landscapes in their state. I mean, we talk about that in Texas all the time, but my wife and I did a big loop around New Mexico for our wedding anniversary in May, and we were just sort of stunned.
mhm,
You can go from white sands to brown sands to 8,000 feet and to everything in between.
yes, I agree. In fact, my husband and I contemplated retiring in New Mexico at one point in our lives, and grandchildren ruled us out on that. But
Right. So, how about after the show concluded? Did you have the chance to catch your breath? Did you hit the ground running? Were just so many ideas spinning through your head you couldn't stop? What was that like? Maybe the last couple of weeks of October and into early November?
We as a group met at my place. I've built a new art studio and it's just now pretty much open. And so everybody came to the art studio and we had a great just sit and talk about what went well, what we need to improve, what our hopes are for the future. So that was very helpful. We probably did that maybe within 2 weeks of when we took down the show. And then my son got married. So I didn't catch my breath. I just kept going full force. But then after he married, then I've been able to, I think, take a deep breath and focus on where am I headed now. And
Have you had any other shows since the conclusion of the Magnificent Seven Rides Again?
I have actually concurrently when the Magnificent Seven rides again, I had a show go up the day after we had our reception in near Houston at Brookwood Community. They had a show with, I'm not even sure how many artists called Art with a Purpose. And Brookwood, for those of you who don't know, it's a residential community as well as a place where adults with disabilities are able to create things, grow things. They have a nursery, they have a ceramic studio, all kinds of things. And a restaurant. They employ these adults who can live on site. And so I have a good friend whose son is a member of the community there. And so she reached out to me and asked if I'd like to be a part. So that work, Brookwood decided to extend that exhibit. So that's still up and will be up until first couple of weeks of January. It's in Brookshire, Texas. And then also concurrently with that, Brookwood asked artists if they would like to do a collaboration with the Citizen, and of course, I thought that was a great idea. So I'm working with Citizen Jennifer, and I've been with her once to paint together. And so she, we had a great time. She kind of directed me on what she wanted to be in the composition. She wanted to do a tiger, and Brookwood has a great garden. So I wanted to do some garden landscape type things. And so we started a composition and painted some together. And then I'll go back in December and then again in January to finish up the painting that we did together. And then Brookwood will have a gala, I think in April, where I'm not sure if it's a silent auction or how that to generate funds for Brookwood. So
So, we're recording this podcast the week of Thanksgiving, and we're obviously moving into fall now, and colors have started to change a little bit. And I wanted to ask you, how does the season of the year impact either how you see things or how you translate what's in your head to your canvas?
it's like a shift on your color palette. So I'm an oil painter mostly. And so on your color palette, you usually have a warm and a cool color. So you have a warm yellow and a cool yellow, a warm red and a cool red, a warm green, a cool green. So it's interesting as the fall comes that you push more towards that cool side. As I was walking this morning, one of our oak trees has turned this beautiful red color, going from green to warm red. And I can see now that it's going towards the cool side, which the cool red is alizarin crimson. Anyway, it's just a beautiful look through. If I took my color palette that I paint from and just magnified it into the landscape. So
How about as we would move towards a deeper winter, whether it be sort of mid January to maybe the first week or two of February, where we do get cold weather and we lose a lot of our foliage? Are you able to incorporate that into your work as well?
mhm. I think it's really interesting when the trees lose their leaves because then you can see their structure underneath. And when I first started painting as an artist myself, painting what I wanted to paint, which was probably about been painting my whole life, but I've taught. So mostly that started for me in about 2008. And my subject matter back then, I was incredibly moved. I had taken some students on a competition to Clear Lake, University of Houston, Clear, and there was this grove, a stand of oak trees, and I was so fascinated by the structure of the limbs. So I took a bunch of photos and then I came home and back then I was building my own canvases. I built my canvases and started painting these oak trees. And for me, it was like the gracefulness of the limbs was almost like human limbs. And I purposely did not paint any greenery in them, no leaves, because I really wanted to concentrate on that beautiful, elegant structure of the tree. For me, I really like winter in that regard. And I thought recently, because I've gotten way more into bigger landscapes but I've been thinking recently, I might go back and just revisit just painting some trees without leaves and trying to concentrate more on that structure and the elegant beauty of a tree.
As we move into nearly 2025 and the first perhaps 2 quarters, do you have any shows or maybe work you've talked about the trees and the tree structure, and I'm fascinated by that, but anything you, kinda got your eye on for the first half of the year?
I've got 2 holiday shows in the area, so I'm kinda can't get out of 2024 yet. As we were mentioning early, the Texas Hill Country Atelier has an art scramble December 6th. Public is invited. I contributed 4 works for that of Roadrunners, which have a whole story about Roadrunners.
What is it?
Not to be too long and go on, but when I was my husband and I had been living in an RV while we're building a house. So a year ago, I was painting out at my brother's place in Hunt and in an old, probably 1940s bunkhouse, non-air conditioned, just concrete floor, very primitive. So as I'm painting, and I had all the doors and windows open because it was warm, and I got this sensation something was watching me. And so I slowly turned, and as I turned, there was a roadrunner that had stepped into this little bunkhouse and was looking at me. So I tried to grab my camera. I startled him. He ran off way too fast for me. Fast forward to this year, I spoke of my studio that we just completed in our barn. I my kids had come in actually for the Magnificent Seven reception, and I wanted to show them my studio, which was almost finished, not quite. The doors had been closed on the studio. When we walked in, there was a roadrunner nesting on the windowsill inside my studio. I had this, it was like a divine experience for me. I just this rush of, wow, long story short there, we left the doors open. I was worried about the roadrunner, how long it had been in there. I brought it a little Tupperware dish of water. It eventually left, and it left a small little feather on the windowsill, which I incorporated into my atelier works of art. Anyway, just okay. So I'm on a whole roadrunner kick. I have 3 other roadrunner paintings that I'm currently trying to get ready for in answer to your question. I am doing Bridget's handmade holiday market, Bridget's Basket, next Sunday, December 1st, I think is the date, but it's Sunday. And then the following week, Kerrville Hills Winery at Schreiner University is having a Christmas market.
Right.
So I'm going to do that as well. Never done that. So that'll be a new experience. Anyway, and then trying to think, do I have finished the Brookwood project in January?
You got a busy quarter coming up,
I
actually
bet. Yeah.
busy 6 weeks.
Yes. Yes.
How about into 2025? Do you have any shows planned, or are you pointing towards the next iteration of the Magnificent Seven rides again? Tell us about what you're maybe down the road a little bit.
Sure. Thing that I've did this year, one of my goals this year, I joined a society called the Oil Painters of America, OPA it's called, and they offer opportunities to apply for shows and online shows as well as logistical shows. And last July, I was admitted into a juried show in Indianapolis. So that was super exciting for me, one of my personal goals. So the way that you advance in OPA is you have to be invited to 5 shows and juried shows. So I will continue to press on and hopefully be invited to some of those juried shows with OPA. I also belong to another organization called Oil Painters, no, Outdoor Painters Society. Sorry. OPS. And so it's a group of artists who paint plein air. They gather and they have different events all over Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, speaking of. So I'm hoping I wasn't quite as active this past year because of other commitments, but hoping that I can do more of that with the group next year. And then Out of those things, I don't have anything specific planned for Magnificent Seven next year, but I know that something will move me, and be it travels to New Mexico or I don't know, but it'll come forth.
Well, Laura, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to find out any more information about you or your art, what might be the best place for them to go?
Sure. My website is probably a great starting point, and it's laurawilliamsgallery.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook in that same name. I also am represented by the Good Art Company in Fredericksburg, if you want to hop over there, a good place to look, and Adams Gallery in the Austin area.
Laura, thanks again. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Tom.